Hi there, I'm Sean Osterling. I'm a Christian counselor, and I wanted to make a video on some social commentary. This just popped up on my Google, and I was like, you know what, let me make a video on that. I want to make videos on social issues from time to time and speaking speaking to them, relating it to counseling and psychology kind of issues and give my perspective on things. So anyway, this article popped up, and what I think I'll do is I'll read the article, and then I've broken this down and into some things to summarize here, and uh, and then I'll give my take on it. So, okay, teen takeovers push cities to take action as experts see echoes of the COVID pandemic. Interesting. Relating this stuff to COVID right off the bat. Uh, Teens who have been clashing with cops went into lockdown during their middle school years when they were learning how to interact with the world around them. Let's watch some of this video. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but I'm going to play some of it here. Okay, here we go.
Tonight, dramatic new video of Chicago police pinning people down and struggling to quell massive Memorial Day crowds. Police say 53 people were arrested and nearby 3 teens were shot. This 24 hours after investigators say an 18-year-old plowed his car into a crowd of 5 officers, all now in fair condition. The teen charged with attempted murder. 2 so-called teen takeovers in 24 hours. A viral trend sweeping the nation with massive gatherings organized
Look at
online and
that.
unleashed on unsuspecting communities coast to coast, often turning chaotic or violent. In Tampa, police body camera video shows massive fights amid a teen takeover earlier this month. Here, you see the mayhem from above. Authorities say 22 people were arrested as young as 12. Another
22
brawl
people.
breaking out at this Chipotle in Washington, D.C. And outside Milwaukee, cars spinning out in this intersection. Authorities
I
last
guess
month
12 years
responding to
old.
12 teen takeovers in one weekend. Now, Chicago officials weighing targeting parents, with one
Spinning around in
representative
the
proposing
cart.
charging parents of minors arrested at teen takeovers after the city's 10 p.m. curfew with contributing to the delinquency of a minor. A Class A misdemeanor punishable by up to a $2,500 fine and 364 days in jail.
Okay, so um, these cities it looks like are considering going after the parents because of this behavior. Let's keep going and see what the article has to say. Mayhem over Memorial Day weekend in Chicago erupted without warning. Now that's going to be important. I'm going to come back to that without warning thing because of some of what's stated later in the article. On Sunday, hundreds of teenagers descended on a housing project on the west side. 5 Chicago officers trying to disperse the crowd sustained minor injuries when they were hit by a car. I think that was the one where they're charging the teen with attempted murder. On Monday, hundreds more teens showed up at a beach on the south side, and clashes erupted when police tried to get them to leave, resulting in 53 arrests and 9 weapons being confiscated. 9 weapons. So, teenagers with weapons, probably guns, I would imagine. Could be knives or other things. 53 arrests. Wow. Probably just a small portion based on just the crowds that they were showing at these things. I mean, lots of people there. Both were examples of phenomenon that has been sweeping the country for months, which frustrated law enforcement. Law enforcement officials call teen takeovers. Chicago incidents caught the attention of President Donald Trump, who used the outbreak of violence to launch a broadside on Truth Social against the mayor of Chicago and the governor of Illinois. I guess he wrote, teen takeover in Chicago, 5 officers badly hurt, mayor and governor are terrible, should call for help, he wrote. But the takeovers are not just a Chicago problem. In recent weeks, they've been reported in Milwaukee, Tampa, and Orlando, Florida, and Atlanta, and on the Jersey Shore. In New York City, hundreds of young people stormed a mall in the Bronx this year. Teen takeovers have also become a major nuisance in Washington, D.C., particularly on the waterfront at the Navy Yard. Just gonna keep reading through this and then I'm gonna give my commentary. Teenagers behaving badly in groups is hardly a new thing, experts said, but social media has made it easier to rapidly mobilize this generation of teenagers who may be craving social interaction, looking for an outlet after having spent their formative years isolated during the COVID pandemic. Okay, so the article writer is trying to tie this to COVID isolation, and that's why years later, teens are going out and doing burnouts in the street and getting into fights in these places. It's because 5 or 6 years ago, um, they had to be stuck in their homes for a matter of months' time before they and doing virtual school and all of that stuff. I remember I was working in the schools at that time, and yeah, we went and we did work from home and locked down and all that stuff for a while, and then went back to school and masked up and all that. So they're saying because of going through that, that's why years later they're acting out in these behaviors. Interesting, interesting. We'll come back to that. If you are a teen today, you grew up or came of age during COVID when you were locked down, said Samuel Abrams, a teacher and senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Your social space is a screen. You are lonely. You're probably a little depressed, he said. You're not as physically active as you need to be, and you are desperate for human interaction and social contact. And you know when there's a chance to gather and be part of something larger, we see teens flock to it. This is a very gentle, empathetic response. It's a very excuse making response, frankly. Like, I don't hear any accountability in a description of the situation like that. Many of today's teenagers went into lockdown during middle school when kids are supposed to be learning how to socialize and interact with the world around them, Abrams said. Uh, and of course, all of school, all of school, like is part of socialization, and not just middle school. I mean, every year is a formative year, frankly. But that's what. So Abrams said that's what these teen takeovers really represent to me. Abrams said they're not random violence. It's not out of control youth. So he's saying, and the article is telling you, don't think of it as random violence. Um, and it's not the youth being out of control. You know, there's something to that, and that I think that some of that violence could be specific. I don't know. So yeah, it might not be random violence. It could be specific targeted violence. And as far as the behavior being out of control, you know, I think out of control is kind of a phrase of speech we use. For the most part, people aren't really out of control most of the time. Um, you know, unless you're maybe highly dysregulated, having a panic attack, so, if you're on substances, drugs, you're experiencing like a psychotic episode, something maybe extremely upsetting and traumatic could be happening. Like there's situations where you could genuinely be feeling out of control. Um, but in these situations, I mean, these kids look like these teens or even adults look like they're out there deliberately to have fun and create some mayhem. So, you know, in that sense, I agree that they're not out of control in that sense. They have control, but they're using their control in a way to act out, which then, as a figure of speech, we would call out of control. So, anyway. More I'll keep reading, I'll keep reading. I was gonna wait on my commentary. More often than not, it is a desperate need for connection, he said. Okay, so from the videos I just did he watch these videos when they asked him this for the interview? It's a need for connection. That's really nice. That's really nice. They're doing burnouts in their cars and hanging out of their cars and all masked in the street, fighting each other because of a need for connection. It's a very a attachment theory kind of framing right? I might in a counseling session with a couple, I might look for that. What is the underlying emotion behind a conflict? What is the underlying need that is really coming out as a secondary emotion of anger that's coming out in conflict? Really, a desire for a spouse to be loved and cared for. And maybe the anger is coming out of pain, out of feeling unloved or betrayed or something like that. So there's like the attachment framework. Um, Now, in the context of this kind of behavior, and outside of the therapy session, it's like is taking a very empathetic and understanding attachment framework and applying it into a setting like this really beneficial for society, right? I distinguish between what is for the therapy room, what is for the therapy office, and what is the role of society outside, right? Because ther therapy is not the outside world. The outside world is not therapy. The therapy space is a specifically, mm, it's like it's a created space for a purpose, and that's different than what the rest of society needs to be doing. Like, I'm extraordinarily empathetic and exploratory in different things in the therapy space, and yet at the same time, outside of the therapy office, I am more than just therapist man. I have more opinions and views, and just I'm a whole person. I'm not just therapist man. And this strikes me going, well, what they're doing is it's just this need for connection is taking like a psychological, therapeutic, empathizing, frankly, excuse making sort of lens and applying it outside of outside of that therapeutic context where it's a whole different thing. But anyway, I digress. I'm gonna keep going through the article. In addition, Abrams said teen takeovers swell up fast because many teenagers just have no place else to go. Okay. They're doing burnout like circles. I don't even know what you call that in the streets because they don't have some place to go. Okay. They found they they I think they're exactly where they want to be. Okay. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going. There used to be more of what experts called third spaces, not home or school, where kids could socialize freely. Can they bring their guns? But spaces that are affordable and welcoming to teenagers are increasingly harder to find, Abrams said. I mean, yeah, because if you're going to be doing burnouts and getting into fights and bringing weapons, uh, like what kind of space is appropriate for that? Okay. My automatic thought, CBT automatic thought. My automatic thought is the only place that's appropriate to rein in that kind of behavior is prison. Where can you corral people that will keep them that will give them a space to be where they can hang out and but also be safe, not bringing weapons, not engaging in burnouts and fights and crime and things like that. Like you'd need like a armed, reinforced sort of structure. I mean, you'd need a prison for that. That's not what they mean, though. Okay, I'm terrible here. I'm terrible getting sidetracked. Anyway, he says, take the library. Okay, he went someplace else with it. My mind went to jail. Take the library, he said. We always see plenty of room for senior citizens, plenty of room for adults, and programming for adults, Abrams said. We see lots of space for little kids. We don't see as much room for 11, 12, 13-year olds or 16-year-olds, okay? So is saying, well, there needs to be programs for this. This harkens back to like, I don't know, midnight basketball programs. There needs to be programs. Okay, Jasmine Ford, A psychiatric nurse practitioner and clinical instructor at the University of Illinois at Chicago said teenagers today face a mental health crisis that accelerated during the pandemic and has not returned to pre-COVID levels. Okay. Now, I don't know what that means. Mental health crisis. Was the world ever not in a mental health crisis? I mean, we're like one of, if not the most therapized countries in the world. Mental health seems like it's as bad as ever. Um, would the will the world ever not be in a crisis of mental health? I mean, it's kind of a like the word mental health itself. It's just a different lens of looking at things than people looked at things in the world before. It's like the world had different terms for these things and dealt with these things in different ways, and then psychology and psychiatry came along, and we developed new words and new terms for it. Um, but I don't know. I guess I'm just averse to. Um, it just seems like too many things are called crises. There's too many things that are called crises. So anyway, and she's saying there's a crisis. That it's a crisis. That it was a crisis. That it got even more crisis, and then it has not turned to less crisis. And the reason why they're doing burnouts and gathering into large crowds is because of a mental health crisis. So let's see. So there is also an element of arrested development for many young people who missed milestones in their childhoods because of the pandemic, Ford said. Okay, so there's another COVID tie-in. And the results of that may not be fully understood for another 10 to 20 years. So how did COVID affect kids growing up, affect these teens in formative years? Did being stuck or suppressed in their homes for many months at a time, where social activity would have been limited. They would have been doing virtual school, online school, and playing with kids online, or still maybe socializing locally, but not to the same degree. Masking up, all of that. How did that affect kids? How will that affect kids for years to come? Board said many of those teenagers are seeking viral social media moments and pure validation as they try to feel that they belong in the world around them. Belonging. Oh, you know what? I got to write that down. I don't think I put that in my notes when I was summarizing this. The different aspects of this I want to talk about. Belonging. Okay, so it only takes a few people in the group who want to initiate disruption to carry the event out of control. Okay, so there's there is an element of contradiction here, because the teacher was saying, um, don't look at it as youth being out of control. It's not out of control youth. And then the psychiatric nurse says, well, kids can um, do disruptive things that carry the event out of control, which would be teens being out of control. So it seems like that clashes there. But I mean, maybe they were interviewed at different times. They didn't consult with each other. So, but that's just different perspectives here. Are they out of control? Are they not out of control? Um, okay. Quote, it's not just whether there should be accountability, it's whether or not the accountability alone is going to change things long term, Force said, because this isn't the first year we're having this conversation. We keep having the same conversations. For the authorities, dealing with the teen takeovers has been like playing whack-a-mole. No sooner do they get one situation under control than another pops up. There's widespread agreement that to help deal with the crisis, one group needs to step up. Parents. In Chicago, the city council this week began drafting an ordinance that would allow police to charge the parents of teenagers who are arrested with contributing to the delinquency of a minor. Okay, so start holding the parents more responsible. Okay, so there's a connection there of why are these teens acting out like this? Because the parents are not supervising them. They're allowing this to happen. They don't know where their kids are. They're letting them go out. Uh, there's not consequences for them at home, whatever. If you go after the parents, then the parents are going to start reining in their kids. It's kind of simple in that way, right? So for all the explanations and or excuses being given by the teacher and the psychiatric nurse to explain these behaviors, um, the cities are considering just going after the parents, making there be consequences. Okay, quote, and that's when the parents allow their minor children to commit crimes, Alderman Brian Hopkins told NBC Chicago. So the laws are already on the books, they need to be enforced. The U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Janine Pirro, also agrees that parents should be held accountable and step it up at home. So there's this common thing happening here, at least in the people being interviewed, that, and I think there's a common response that it's easy for the mind to go like, where are the parents? What are the parents doing about this? Shouldn't they be held accountable to some degree for what their kids are doing? And okay, so law-abiding taxpayers should no longer have to pay for parental neglect, Pirro said at a news conference last month. Parents, do your job or we will do ours. Okay, there's some boldness there. But that's easier said than done, law enforcement experts told NBC News. I personally believe that parents should be held accountable for the behavior of their children, especially if they're the parents of young children who are committing crimes, said Brian Higgins, a former police chief of Bergen County, New Jersey, and a lecturer at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York City. But practically, we'll have to see how this plays out because there will be legal challenges, he said, and it will depend on how old the child is who gets arrested. For example, do you charge the parents of older teens who are still minors but have been charged as adults? Okay, so there's complexities to this. Darren Porcher, a former New York City police lieutenant, said hitting neglectful parents with a charge is a good start, but uh, the onus is still on the police to prevent teen takeovers in the first place. I think that's written by the writer of the article there. We need to have a proactive approach from police, Porcher said. Let's see, Porcher was the former New York City police lieutenant. They should be monitoring social media to establish where their meetups would be occurring and place the officers accordingly. The problem, retired New York Police Detective Mike Alcazar said, is finding enough detectives who are social media savvy and know what to look for online and can spot the threat. These situations escalate quickly because all the teenagers have to do is DM each other. And next, what you have is this kind of situation, said Alcazar, who is also an adjunct professor at John Jay. Most of these kids are good kids, but if they all turn up in one place and there is no visible police presence, things can turn violent. Okay, so I want to give my thoughts on this article, and then you can leave your thoughts in the comments below. Okay, so I took some notes here to talk about to give some commentary on this. I've already put some of my commentary in there as I was talking, but um, so as far as the behaviors of what are going on in these groups, just from video clips I've seen here, videos I've seen, um, on YouTube of these teen takeovers or um, mobs of teens engaging in disorderly and criminal conduct. That would be another way of phrasing it rather than calling it teen takeovers or flash mobs, as these things were called before. Um, okay, so something the article did not mention. In fact, I find the silence of it interesting. Is that the article did not mention that in like ubiquitous across these events that the teens are predominantly they're black African American teens. There's a clear um, racial element to it, that it is a I don't know, a cultural subset of society. It's not happening. It doesn't seem to be happening among like other racial groups. It seems to be when you watch these videos, it seems to be made up largely of black teens. And um, given how much society talks about race and racism, and as far as from like the political left talking about um, from a critical race theory lens, systemic racism, systemic oppressions, all those kind of things. It's interesting that the article didn't make any mention about it in this case, that none of that was brought into it, and I just find that curious. But not even like they didn't even mention that. So certainly it seems like the intentionally not talking about that piece of it does itself communicate something. Like, I mean, like it's obvious. It conveys like, well, don't talk about that, right? So they're taking over streets, they're blocking roads, engaging in again disorderly conduct. They're probably ignoring curfew laws. There's resistance as far as when police come, fighting with the police. There's fights going on with people within the group. There's having weapons or firearms, even shootings occurring, resisting orders to leave. I've saw videos of people running on top of cars. Obviously, there's people doing the burnouts. I've seen vehicles, at least a vehicle, set on fire. I think there's also an element of breaking into stores. So like there's lots of crime tied to this. I mean, there's kind of the general disorderly conduct of the whole assembly being an unlawful assembly. I think these things are often happening at night too. There's a lack of there's no parental supervision going on. Like this, there's not adults reining this in or something. They're just being, whether they're sneaking out or being allowed to go out or their parents don't know, like whatever it is, of them doing this and in many different cities, and there seems to be an allowance for that. I mean, this wasn't something that was happening in my town growing up. This isn't something, I wasn't aware of anything like this. There's nothing going on like this in my social circles growing up. That wasn't a part of that just wasn't a thing. I mean, what can I say? It wasn't a thing. Like you didn't do that, you'd risk getting arrested. I don't want to get arrested. So now the article did mention that this is something that's been happening repeatedly, but the article seemed to be conveying that this was all because of COVID. Seemed to be really harkening back to COVID and the lockdown being the cause for this. But I'm pretty sure I've seen videos of these same kind of things happening in years past, even pre-COVID. And so just to add to what I'm saying with some actual video clips, I'm going to show you some blasts from the past because frankly, it irks me that this article is blaming COVID for something that was obviously happening prior to COVID. So let's look at some of these videos and try to imagine how something that wouldn't happen until 2020 was the cause of something that was happening for years prior. Does that make sense? Okay. These used to be called flash mobs. Let's check out some videos. Which flash mobs used to be these cheeky, goofy things that were done on like college campuses, and then somewhere it began to be used for, well, what I'll show you here.
Order to come to the Love's gas station across the street from the football stadium because it would be easier for me to pick her up over there than to try to get into traffic.
And this is from 14 years ago, so this is from 2012. So this is 8 years before COVID. 8 years before COVID. COVID did not cause this.
Over coming from the stadium. But sitting there waiting for my daughter to come across the street, I saw a large group of kids coming across the
Dozens of
street.
teens robbed a store.
I don't know how
Flash
many it
mob.
was, but it was a large number of kids. At that time, I knew some trouble was coming. So I stepped out of my car to kind of see what was going on. And at first, they were trying to attack a small group of just mild mannered kids just standing there waiting for their parents to come. But they ran. I mean, they ran through the
I just
Greyhound
lost
bus
audio.
station
Oh.
I'm
and
sorry, go ahead.
down and down 20 down, and we need help there at the Loves. Soon after that, they came back to the Loves.
Okay, so that was one video. That was from for what would have been like 2012. Here's another one.
From the moment the teens started flooding in the door, shop owner Luke Cho knew that something wasn't right.
You see a group of teenagers walking in or marching in one by one, as you can see, as it looks like it's some kind of procession.
To Cho, it looked like a flash mob, so he immediately locked the door.
At least I think I kind of maybe stopped the flow a little bit, but I quickly realized something bad's about to happen, and I alerted my staff to call 911.
Most of the group flocked here to this area right beneath a security camera. The teens congregated in this corner because this is what they found what they were looking for, an expensive exclusive brand of jeans called nudie jeans. They average about $200 a pair.
We happen to be only one of few that sell nudie jeans.
Well, there's a different incentive because in the article it was blaming COVID and kids just wanting to connect, but in this situation, this is from 13 years ago, there's an obvious incentive there. They think they can get away with a crime. There is something that they want. There's an incentive, expensive jeans to either wear or sell for a profit. Like there's an obvious motivation there. That less empathetic, less empathetic motivation there. Okay, so 13 years ago, that would be 2013. So that is a long time before COVID. Let's do another one. This is from 3 years ago. So okay, this one's after COVID. So this would be one that the article would be talking about. This would be 2023.
Their way through the convenience store at the Arco, and according to the LA County Sheriff's Department, this all happened around 2 a.m. People were grabbing items left and right, anything they could grab, just an absolute wild scene. And one resident told me he hears street takeovers all the time, but I spoke to one employee who told me that he's seen the street takeovers, but the looting is definitely a out of the ordinary thing that happened here overnight. And again, back live, we're still working to find out more about what.
Okay, so again, this behavior, according to the article, is a desire to connect. It's not the desire to have fun, breaking in and stealing and activating the dopamine by engaging in like risky behavior for fun and because other people are doing it. It's just a desire to. It's an empathetic reason to connect. Here's another one. Let's see. This one's a blast from the past. This is 16 years ago, so this is from 2010.
Punches on the plaza. This is home video of a fight April 10th in Kansas City. What starts as a flash mob in a flash turns violent.
When they called like the helicopters and more police out there, that's when it really got crazy.
You're seeing some of the more than 700 juveniles involved. Before the night's over, several people will be hurt.
700.
Flash mobs are a child of social networks. Someone sends a text, goes to places like Facebook and Twitter, urging people to meet at the same place to do the same thing. And flash mobs aren't always bad, though. On May 1st, Jeff Curtis videotaped this flash mob outside Omaha's Joslin Art Museum. UNO and elementary students coming together to dance to Jack Johnson's 3R song, Reduce, Reuse, Recycle.
Okay, and so that's a perfect highlight of the different language being used. Why would you call this sort of display of behavior a flash mob, and then also call this
Before the night's over,
display
several people will be
of
hurt.
behavior a flash mob? Why would you associate a cheeky, goofy dance activity, a choreographed dance that is made to be kind of look spontaneous, even though they're planned? Why would you associate that with masses of teens meeting that has nothing to do with choreographed and entertainment for people to observe around them, and often involves like criminal activity. So there's intentional language manipulation in that too. Okay, so that was all just to prove my point that this stuff was happening years before COVID. I just destroyed the whole article's premise right there, but I just got to insert this in here. Like this was happening before COVID. It seems like a very tangential kind of explanation or excuse to blame it on COVID. What else? So explanations that the article gives that I wanted to hit on. So the article puts a lot of this blame on COVID, that teens were locked up during COVID, that the lockdown caused social isolation, lack of appropriate socialization, arrested development, missing developmental milestones, lack of physical exercise, lack of third spaces and social programs, peer and social media validation. I noticed that the article kind of tells you what to think insofar as that these behaviors should not be seen as out of control behaviors, that they shouldn't be random violence. I want to point out that these things seem to be happening in cities. So make of that what you will, but it's happening in certain cities and like demographics. It's not happening elsewhere. It doesn't seem like it's happening in, I don't know, in like a rural area where the culture is going to be different, right? The culture is not going to tolerate this kind of thing, where the justice system is going to come down harder on this kind of thing, whereas it would be potentially softer on them with it happening in the cities. So, but I wanted to hit on these different explanations, let's say. So social isolation, and lack of of so socialization factors, that being the case. Really, for all of these explanations, I think they all kind of fall apart to a degree in that this seems to predominantly be happening in one racial demographic. If you go, well, it was the lack of socialization, being the COVID lockdowns and missing developmental milestones and lacking physical exercise and not having other spaces to go. Uh, all of that begs the question, then why isn't there more diverse racial makeup in these groups? Why aren't there more white people in these groups? Why isn't there more Asian and Hispanic people in these groups? Why is it largely made up of, I mean, you can see it in the videos of this. Why is it predominantly black people that are making up the groups here? So if it actually was these explanations, and just these explanations, if these were really the primary causes, that COVID locked down kids when they were 10, and now that they're 16, they're doing burnout, spinning around in their cars because they felt isolated 5, 6 years ago and didn't get proper socialization in that time, and it stunted them. And therefore, in that time, why would that only affect one group? The other aspect of that is like, okay, so that was 4, 5, 6 years ago, right? It's 2026. It's May 2026. The lockdowns began over 6 years ago. And most of it was, I don't know, was it over within about a year? I can't remember how long it was until the school that I worked at went back to school. We masked up, did all that. We were doing virtual before that. Kids still, I think kids were still, um, like the kids were still hanging out. They were still going out and doing things, even if they weren't going to school. Even if there was a lot of lockdown stuff happening, it didn't mean that there was no social interaction going on. And then families with siblings were still having interactions with siblings and things. It's not like social interaction totally stopped. And this was affecting everybody. So it wasn't just affecting any particular racial demographic. It would have been affecting everybody. It would have been affecting all the teens. So again, it just begs the question: why would this be coming out in one particular group? What else did I want to say about that? With regard to like the socialization, it's like there's been, again, 4 or 5 years for socialization to be happening. It begs the question again: why, um, why would socialization not be happening during even the COVID time? That it's like, what's the needed socialization to happen? The teaching for parents to be teaching their kids and expecting of their kids that it's not okay to go out late at night by yourself, to go join massive groups of other kids, of other teens. That it's not okay to be involved in criminal behavior, that it's not okay to be messing like with the police, it's not okay to be having fights with other kids, it's not okay to be acquiring weapons or guns by some means. Like, it's not okay to be taking your car and doing like having for your friends hanging out the windows and doing burnouts in the road. Okay, so like that's when it's saying, well, it's arrested development, a lack of socialization. Like, it's essentially, the article is saying that they wouldn't have been socialized back in the COVID time, and since then, in the half a decade since then, that these teens were not socialized insofar as that these behaviors are not okay. That what is needed is an empathetic response. Oh, well, they lack spaces to be in. Oh, well, they didn't get taught not to do this. And what kind of response, like, I know what kind of response that brings up in me. Like, I want to turn my head sideways, like what the dog, Brian and Family Guy. No, 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 it was Stewie. Stewie would turn his head like really sideways, cock his head when there was something like that was crazy to him. The expectation to not engage in this kind of behavior, like, that would start at the home, that would be inculcated in the school, and then of course be affected by the culture. What is the culture conveying? It seems pretty outlandish and ridiculous to me to excuse all of these things away as basically a lack of emotional maturity and things. I guess this my expectation would be that, well, I guess it begs the question. It's like, why would COVID lockdowns be the cause of a particular demographic, a particular racial demographic of people being like emotionally, socially, having the development arrested during that time, and then that manifesting in this way? I guess, and then what is the social response to it, I guess? I mean, that's the other piece, is what is the social response? The legal response here is that they're looking at charging the parents, but what is like society's response to be? And the response from the article that it's conveying is um, that the reader should basically look upon this with a gentleness and empathy and understanding and attachment, sort of understanding that goes like, well, this is just behavior of kids who are maybe depressed, anxious, they have a mental health crisis going on, they're really just seeking to connect with others and find meaning, and maybe they're just being goaded on by other kids, and all of that conveys the message of, you really can't expect them to behave better than this. You really can't expect them to not be doing this, because of COVID 5 or 6 years ago. And with the psychiatric nurse saying that we'll see like how this plays out over the next 10 to 20 years, kind of sounds to me like, is it almost conveying like, well, just sort of expect it's 5, 6 years out. We're blaming COVID for these behaviors now in this subset of society. And then are we going to continue blaming COVID for antisocial and illegal behaviors, criminal behaviors, behaviors that violate the rights of other people, that violate the laws, that violate other people's property? Are we going to keep blaming COVID for that? Are we going to say that the arrested development, that the lack of emotional and social development that happened 5 to 6 years ago will just keep manifesting through time over the next decades, and that society's response to that needs to just be empathy and gentleness and understanding? And you go, oh, COVID arrested your development, and so that's why you were running away from the police, hopping along cars and stepping on them and busting them up. That's why you were in the street fighting each other and fighting with the police. That's why you're breaking into a store and looting it. Now that's why you're doing any number of these things. Like that's why you brought a gun and got into a shooting with other people in the crowds. Like, oh, because 5 years, 10 years, 20 years ago, COVID happened. Okay. I'm so sorry that that happened to you. Um, like that's something that happened to you that shouldn't have. And so these behaviors now are not really your fault. That's what it conveys to me. That's what I hear here is excuse making. Excuse making, excuse making, excuse making. I do like that it's holding the parents accountable, because obviously there is a parental element here. They need to be supervising their kids. They need to know where their kids are at, and if they're not going to do that, then the law is going to make them do it, right? It's going to provide incentives. It's going to it will charging the parents means disincentivizing allowing their kids to engage in reckless behaviors. Okay, if the parents don't want to get charges or fines or things like that, then to avoid that, they need to know what their kids are doing and keep track of them and keep them from acting out in these ways. So I like that that there's accountability there. Oh, um, therapy is a place of accountability, a place of a person going, you know what, I want to change, I want to grow, I want to get better. I want to look at myself and understand myself and figure out my stuff. And so there's a process of maturing. There's a process of taking more ownership of oneself, and at the same time, like detaching from toxic shame, from toxic messages and things of all or nothing thinking, of negative core beliefs, different things like this, of stuff from the past. There can be placing responsibility and understanding uh, uh, into like other areas of life, like understanding, well, how did your childhood affect you? How did trauma affect you? How did other people in your life affect you? You know, where does blame or understanding need to be put in these other areas of life, to where it's like, there are things that weren't your fault. You know, like in a therapy setting, to, let's say, to work with any of these teens, like in the therapy setting, like, yeah, COVID wasn't their fault. And that was a facet of something that would shape their life. And yet if it's in the context of like emotional dysregulation, antisocial or criminal behavior, like you couldn't you wouldn't be doing any client justice by not coming around to one's own personal responsibility, one's own, like that's where the power to change is going, like, what's my part to play in this? Okay, it's like things happen to me. Am I just gonna go through life still allowing the past to shape my future, that things happen to me, so I'm gonna still let that play out in my life, or am I going to take charge? Am I going to take ownership? You know, if you were if you were engaged in some sort of criminal activity, if you're fighting with the police, blocking streets, setting cars on fire, whatever it may be, like I don't know if it would be the first step, but one of the steps along the way of the growth would be the recognition of, you know what, I did that. You know what, that was my behaviors, that was my actions, that that it wasn't the crowd that made me do it. It wasn't anybody else that made me do it. Other people can't make me do things. That it was within one's own control, one's own decision making to do the thing that they did. Because then that's the power to go, you know what, things don't just happen to me. Other people don't just happen to me. You know what? I'm going to make sure that I'm not going out at night doing that. I'm going to make sure I'm going to stay away from the peers, away from the Facebook groups or the DM messages. I'm going to avoid those things. I'm going to find people that are going to be uplifting me towards positive activities, towards things that are going to be moving me better places in life. I'm not going to be engaging in that kind of thing. Like that's where the power is in taking the responsibility, moving that locus of control from, well, something crazy happened in the crowd and then we were just like out of control and just going wild, and then there was like gunshots and police getting involved, and then we were just like fighting, and it's like it's all this stuff. And then if you have a news article or a well-meaning, empathizing teacher or psychiatric nurse that goes, well, all of these things happen to you, like what is somebody gonna do? What is a teen gonna do? Then be like, oh, if you give them an explanation for why they did something wrong, what are they gonna do? Tell you no? Like if you're gonna empathize and go, well, was the reason why you did this criminal behavior because of these things that happened to you? Like, what's anybody gonna do? Like you give somebody you give somebody an out like that. What is somebody gonna do? Like, oh yeah. This is something mentioned in, it's a book called Life at the Bottom from I think he was a psychiatrist. He's a psychiatrist in Britain, Theodore Dalrymple, and he talks about something like this as far as like um, prisoners. He would go to, he worked in hospitals, he worked in slums, he worked in prisons and things, and like basically that prisoners would be um, basically more than happy to take and accept the reasoning that criminologists would give, that that well-meaning, empathizing, I don't know, psychologists, let's say, something like that would give for their criminal behavior. Well, it's because of the trauma in their lives. It's because of things growing up in their family of upbringing and different things like that. And that then people are more than happy to take that kind of reasoning, go, oh yeah, that's why I did that. And at the same time, that takes the locus of control, and it takes it outward. It puts the blame somewhere else. Now there's something valid about understanding the context, the vulnerabilities. What are the things that shaped a person into how they got to where they are? And that's part of what we do in the therapy process, is to understand the past. What is that molding of the clay that is the person, and to how they became shaped, how they became how they are now. And yet at the same time, if you're left with, well, I'm the way that I am because of all the things that happened to me, and I have no kind of control over the things in my life, and everything is other people's fault, and kind of I'm a victim of the world. It's like I haven't done my job as a therapist if that's where anybody is left off at. That's for sure. Because what are you supposed to do with that? And that's what I get from this article. That's what I get from this article is a lot of kind of hand waving of don't don't be upset about this behavior. It's because of COVID. It's because of these things that happened to these poor kids because of COVID, and that must be the explanations, and there can't be other causes. Okay, so the article is not talking about other issues. Again, I mentioned like it doesn't talk about racial issues at all with this. So the silence there to me is deafening. It ignores issues of like, well, what are issues that impact what seem to be like inner city black youth engaging in this behavior, like multi-generational welfare, the like lack of fatherhood, like single parent homes, like single moms raising kids like on welfare basically, drug use, gangs, prison and rap kind of culture, like all of those other elements. And there's racism, and there's of course there's the views of systemic racism and all that kind of stuff, and there's people that believe that, there's people who don't believe that, and there's people who would look at this and go, well, what about the role of like ideology around equity and critical social justice, where groups are being looked at as oppressors and oppressed, as victims and things, that society is systemically racist, and that black people, that minorities are systemically oppressed, and what kind of role does that play? What kind of incentives then does that provide to engage in potentially engaging in criminal behavior, from the view that as a group, then you're part of the victim group. And so then whatever is done as part of the victim group gets excused as part of the victim group because it's society's fault that things are the way they are, right? Like what role does that play? And then with that, there's the view of like the implicit racism or the soft racism and bigotry of then having different expectations, of having lower expectations for certain minority groups at the same time, by going, well, they're part of the victim class, and so therefore they're not going to be held to the same standard as others. And so this article could be viewed in that way, as conveying something like that, because they're going, well, it's COVID's fault. It's because of a lack of socialization. It's because of a lack of connection and arrested development and things like that. And the thing is while the article doesn't say it, it's talking specifically about the population it's talking about has to do with black teen youth. It's not. It doesn't seem to be a wider problem facing all races of teens, all groups of teens. And so is that right there a sign of like an implicit soft racism there that's not even being addressed or not even being recognized? At least some would view it from that perspective. So okay, and but there's just all these other elements that, and there's probably even more factors than that. I mean, really, maybe it stands. I'm just thinking this right now, is that no, none of these interviews were the teens engaged in this. None of these interviews were with ones who were arrested. None of it was with ones who were there. So like you can speculate about why are they doing this and come up with like elaborate psychological reasons, or you could actually talk to them and find out why did they do it. So there's that. So all that to say is that my bias is always towards personal responsibility, because that's where your power and your strength is. Responsibility and holding people accountable for things. And so I like here that these cities are thinking about How do we hold people accountable? How do we get the kids held accountable? Well, you go through the parents. And I think I might have mentioned this earlier, but I can't remember at this point what all I've hit on because I've been talking for a bit. But basically, when it comes down to it, is like you can go, well, it was COVID and the impact of it and all these things, and that's why these things are happening. And then it's like, well, what is the solution to it? And then it gets a lot simpler. It's like, well, you know what? Parents need to be held accountable too. And what the parents need to be doing is holding their kids accountable. And so it's like, wait a minute. It wasn't all of these other things that could be explained. It was that what was needed all along is that parents need to be raising their kids. School and culture, these are also secondary or tertiary factors, also need to be conveying that these kinds of behaviors aren't okay, that this is not the kind of group stuff you want to be behaving in, that there's going to be consequences for it, that there's going to be punishments at home for it, that there's going to be social stigma attached to it, that there's going to be consequences perhaps at school and other situations, who knows? But and that there'd be criminal consequences for it. Okay, that basically the behavior needs to be disincentivized. Good when it comes down to it. Um, a lot of stuff goes back to simple behaviorism at the societal level. Reinforce good behavior. Reinforce the sorts of behavior that are good for society and punish or disincentivize the kinds of behaviors that are bad for society. Okay, so it's one thing to be very empathetic in the counseling environment, but that's within a context of society holding people accountable. As in, if society is holding people accountable, not excusing away their behavior, but holding them responsible, and therefore incentivizing good pro-social behaviors and disincentivizing through punishments and consequences and things, negative antisocial behaviors, then um, then that then that supports therapy because then in therapy, the therapy is the empathetic place for the person to land. The therapy is the place for the person to have to reflectively look at themselves, their own role in behaviors and things, and going, you know what, these behaviors are not working in my life. They're not taking me where I want to go. Those behaviors resulted in me getting in trouble with my parents or at school or with the police or something. Whereas if society is taking on too much of the therapeutic role, if society is going, well, here's all these reasons, here's all these excuses, here's all these things because of COVID and because of the need for connection, and they're desperate or they're depressed, and we're giving all these psychological explanations for things, um, then does that mean there's not going to be consequences for it? And then if there's not consequences to disincentivize, then that's going to incentivize more of it. And if it's not being disincentivized, if there's not consequences for it, then people might not come to therapy for it. People might go, well, if society doesn't have a problem with it, if I've got these reasons for this, then why should I even work on it? Well, maybe it's society's fault. It's society's fault that they would even have any problem with it. There's nothing wrong with me. It's society's problem. Like if society isn't doing its part to hold people accountable, then that's going to potentially decrease the likelihood that they're going to be coming to accountability in therapy itself, but then they're not going to be growing because when it comes down to it, the reason why any of these behaviors are happening in the article or in the videos that I've shown here ultimately comes down to the individual. It is an individual person's choice to go and to respond to a message, to go join some group activity, to go engage in robbing a store and blocking a street and fighting with police and bringing a weapon and shooting someone and engaging in group fights and violence. Like any of that ultimately comes down to the individual person. It's not society's fault. It's not because of trauma. It's not because of these other things. Those things may all have some sort of shaping role in your life when it comes down to it. it comes down to the decision-making process that is happening in here. It is happening. It is this the formation, one's social formation, um, one's emotional regulation, and there's a moral decision making process that is in there that any of us knows. Like, just think about how you make decisions, why you don't go do something that's wrong, why you don't go do some activity like this. Why don't you do that? Okay, whatever that thought process is, I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to be involved with the police. I don't want to accidentally get hurt. Um, I'd rather be doing something else. Maybe there's spiritual reasons for why I don't want to engage in that activity. I want to be safely at home. I want to be with friends who I know that are going to be safe. Like, there's incentives and disincentives there. So, all right, I think I made my point on that. Anyway, like, if I talk anymore, I'm just going to be rambling. So those are my thoughts on this article and how it relates to the counseling world. And I'm gonna do. I think I'll do videos like this from time to time. But please, you can let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you made it this far, thanks for watching. And I'll see you in future videos to come. Thank you. Please see the following disclaimer. The views on this channel are solely my own for educational purposes. They don't represent my employer or any other entity. The channel does not create a therapist-client relationship and does not constitute medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Any suggestions or recommendations are used at your own risk.